Welcome, everyone. It's very exciting to have all of you here today. My name is Marcio Galeato. I'm the co-director of MHPSS.net, a platform that you probably know as connecting the practitioners, the community, the global community members around the mental health and psychosocial support network. And here we are, proud and happy and honored to be hosting the webinar today on enabling environments for effective implementation of MHPSS program in Kenya, Colombia, and Greece. We have a number of presenters that the moderator will be introducing and giving more details about what we will be doing today and how it's going to work. And we just want from the MHPSS.net team to give you a warm welcome once again in our webinars. Moderating today, we have Rachel Shiri, which I happily hand over to you and welcome you as well. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much, Marcio, and hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today for this webinar. So we are here for the MHPSS in Action webinar, kindly hosted by MHPSS.net. My name is Rachel Shiri, and I'm the Communications Officer at the MHPSS Collaborative, and I will be moderating the discussion today, as Marcio said. So the title of today's webinar and the title of the project we are presenting today is Enabling Environments for Effective Implementation of MHPSS Programming in Kenya, Colombia, and Greece, presenting research findings and discussing process to improve research norms. So we are wrapping up a huge project here today for almost 3 years. 3 years, not including the year prior spent on research and stuff like that. So we're very excited to hear all of the research findings from the researchers themselves behind this project. And we are also very lucky to have 2 representatives from Portuguese, the donor, here today. So we have a lot of very interesting perspectives coming up for you. So just a little bit of housekeeping that Marcio didn't get to. Besides the panelists, everyone's microphones are muted. And we have 3 years of very important, very lengthy findings to present today. So as a result, the researchers each get 8 minutes to present their findings, and then I will be raising a little hand after that. And lastly, if you missed anything, don't worry, because everything will be recorded. So you can see the agenda here for today, and I will just introduce you to the speakers that you will be hearing from in just a few minutes. So first of all, we have Dr. Jennifer Flemming, who is the lead researcher for this project. She's also the lead on education and ECD at the MHPSS Collaborative. And then we have Alejandro Henao. Alejandro is the research coordinator for Colombia. Sadly, he cannot be here with us today as he has a meeting that he urgently had to attend, but his findings will be presented in a video presentation that he has created for us. So that's great, and he will also be able to take part in the discussion round through video presentation later on. We have Maria Athanatsiki, who is the coordinator for Greece, and sadly she cannot join us for the presentation of her slides, so that will be done by Jennifer Flemming, but she will hopefully be able to attend the little bit of discussion round later on. Maria is working in Libya and has poor internet connection, so that is why. And then we have Tess Olwala, who is the Kenya Research Coordinator. You will hear from her a little bit later on. And then representing the Portuguese team, we have Charlotte Roche. She's the Education Sector Coordinator for Portuguese. And we're also happy to have Diorca Luton here in the audience from Portuguese as well today. So without further ado, I hand you over to Jennifer Flemming.
Thank you, Rachel. Much appreciated, and everybody for being here. My name is Jen Flemming. I am the lead researcher on this project, and I am going to provide a very brief introduction and then pass the mic on to the research coordinators so we can hear directly from them. So with this project, we set out with some very clear ideas a few years ago. Major one of these was to contribute to the evidence base for MHPSS in education and humanitarian contexts. We wanted to look at multiple and diverse types of humanitarian context, and we wanted to look at least 2 different approaches or programs. We decided we really wanted to use qualitative methods in order to better understand the perceptions of those closest to the programming. And we really wanted to get at sort of more in-depth description. We also chose qualitative methods because we wanted the ability to be flexible. This project started in 2020, so we very much in real time learned that critical value of being adaptable, especially in dynamic contexts like those that we were studying. We also wanted to partner with an implementing organization so that the research could support program relevant and action-oriented learning. So we were incredibly lucky in who we chose to partner with. We partnered with the Norwegian Refugee Council. And in particular, we partnered with their Global Better Learning Program unit, as well as then the country offices and field offices in both Kenya and Colombia. We got a tremendous amount of logistical and content support from them, and it was a wonderful partnership. And then finally, we also partnered with Amal Alliance in Greece. And again, we're able to work through them with multiple implementing partners on the ground, but they were also a tremendous partner in this process. And then finally, we wanted to prioritize dissemination and context. So even though this is kind of the global level dissemination event, we've done a series of dissemination events in each country. And that was something that was a priority from the outset. You know, in Colombia, for example, we were able to partner with both universities and other MHPSS actors to hold a series of events that were most relevant in that context. Slide, please. In terms of our research objectives, our project was really lucky to have a lengthy phase one, and we were able to learn a lot from background research and expert interviews in order to inform the objectives of this project. So we wanted to use a social ecological framework to focus on the enabling environments around an intervention, so around an MHPSS program, and then also around the learner. So our key objectives were to understand what contributes to an enabling environment for MHPSS interventions and approaches in order to improve holistic well-being. And for this, we really wanted to focus on the perspective of children, teachers, caregivers, other education actors. Secondly, we wanted to understand the role of education systems, including schools, both formal and non-formal education programming, and educators in contributing to children's holistic well-being. We wanted to describe some similarities and differences of enabling environments for these programs across diverse contexts. We wanted both geographic location and type of emergency or adversity, as much diversity as possible. And then finally, we wanted to understand the perceived impact of two select MHPSS programs. And as I said, this is NRC's Better Learning Program in Kenya and Colombia, and then Amal Alliance's Colors of Kindness program in Greece. By doing this, we wanted to contribute to organizational and programmatic learning and implementation. So as I said, one of the first things that we ended up doing was we brought onto our team 3 fabulous research coordinators, each of whom live and work in the country of study. So our research coordinators who will present today, they took the lead on all things research, from running introductory workshops, organizing all logistics, leading data collection, overseeing research assistants and enumerators. They participated in data analysis and report writing. So the RCs also ran introductory workshops with NRC and Amal Alliance teams in country. This was, in order to assure our expectations, ideas, and goals were in alignment, and also really trying to provide the implementing organization the opportunity to input on what will be most useful for them to learn. Do a slide, please. Thank you. So I'm not going to go too much into the details here, but we did talk to a total of 513 individuals through key informant interviews and focus group discussions. This included learners, caregivers, teachers, other school staff, such as principals, school PTAs or boards of management, psychologists, international and national NGO workers and staff, ministry representatives, other education actors and stakeholders that were relevant to the location. Slide, please. And so in this webinar, each research coordinator is going to present some key, albeit brief, findings from each country. And then we will engage in discussion about the research process itself a little bit and how we structured our project, what we learned. At this point, we are also going to engage Porticus, our funder, in order to bring into discussion some of the ways in which the funders' decision-making, priorities, and ways of working can impact a research project. So this is my introduction, and we are now going to move into the presentations for each country, and we are going to start with Colombia. And pardon my slight awkwardness here as I share my screen because Alejo's video is going to work the best on my computer. So let me do this. I'm going to play this.
Colombia, and I'm so glad to be here, even if not in person, but I would like to present to you some of the findings and thoughts about Colombia's research. So maybe some of you may not know Colombia's map, and maybe it's the first time for some of you to see things about Colombia. So I will share you the map of Colombia and share you the 5 destinations and locations where we made our research. First one is Magdalena, which is in the north coast and receives a lot of migration from different parts of South America, but especially from Venezuela. Also Arauca, which is also in the border with Venezuela, but which has an ongoing armed conflict, which is still active. Guaviare and Caquetá were really important destinations in Colombia's history, because in Caquetá, the FARC group, which you may know, that is one of the most important guerrilla groups in Colombia, started their operations here in Caquetá. And Nariño, in the south of the country, which shares limits with Peru and with Ecuador, is also a very important path for migration, and also has a lot of indigenous cultures there. So as you see, Colombia is really a really diverse country with different context possibilities and also challenges. So our first finding has to be with the context in the research, because we understood that in order for MHPSS programs to be effective in the context, they have to take into account the specific challenges of each location. Because you can't talk of the same armed conflict in places like Arauca or in places like Guaviare. No, even with the same, you may say the same problem, which is the armed conflict and the same emergency setting. It is really different between regions, and also the ethnic diversity makes the contextualization of the program totally different. For example, with indigenous communities in Arauca or Nariño than in Santa Marta, which is a city, an urban place. So understanding the context and working and programming for the context is essential in Colombia. And also safety, as we have this history of violence, safety was really mentioned word around communities because they perceive that inside homes and schools, adolescents and children are safe, but in between, in the roads, they face a lot of challenges, a lot of risks, both in the rural area where they face armed groups, mines, animals, floods, but also in the urban areas where security around gangs and other armed people is something really difficult for communities. So this safety, going to the school, for the programs, is something to take into account in Colombia's context. But also around the perceptions of holistic well-being, we had some really interesting findings because schools, some people think that for parents, for caregivers, schools are seen just as a place for learning the different mathematics and reading and these kind of skills. But for most of the educational communities, schools are seen as vital for developing social and emotional skills, and for offering safety and opportunities for their children, and also some basic needs, because in some schools and some communities, the food they eat at school is the only food they will have in the day. No, so schools are really important, no, for MHPSS programs, but also because there's a lack of MHPSS services in all locations. No, some people don't have a good access, or don't have an access to any services at all. And whereas some program is mostly provided by NGOs, like NRC in our context, which have this BLP program, that in some locations, and most of the locations, was the only MHPSS service they could access to. No, so schools and these kind of programs become so important in this context, and also because there is a lack of these services. Teachers carry this burden. No, teachers are the one that receive the charge of accompanying the emotions of their students, of their families, of the communities, and they don't have to also these well-being supports. No, the support is lacking, and the educators in all the contexts described as they are stressed, they are overwhelmed by these responsibilities that they don't know how to deal with. No, so they need more support in order to take care of their own lives, but also to be more effective in their teaching. No, these were great well-being findings, and also about NRC and the BLP program. Most of the people, because of this context I have talked to you, they emphasize that BLP is really well received by all actors, and that its impact is really tied uh, into implementers' belief, that when they believe it's valuable, when the teachers or the NRC implementers believe that the programs really impact people, and when they have lived the impact of the program in their own lives, they normally are better and are more effective in teaching about the program. No, that was a really great finding, that you need to live the program in order to be able to transmit it effectively. No, and also about BLP, need this contextualization that also always go around these standardized programs that need to be focused like in something that functions for all the country, but also have balance with the local needs of each context, as we thought before. No, so this was about the NRC Better Learning Program, but also we did 3 dissemination events, one with BLP implementers in the country, also with BLP global unit, and also we made an event here in Colombia with some organizations and also local government authorities, where in this context we thought that in the long term, Colombia is still living a crisis. That some people may think that in Colombia they are conflict ended, but that is not true. We still have a conflict, and we need to prioritize and advocate for MHPSS, because the laws exist here in Colombia to bring some MHPSS services, but they are not implemented. And in the short term, Colombia need more community-based MHPSS interventions. No, we may think, well, what will happen meanwhile the prioritization and the advocacy happens? What may happen in the meantime is that we empower and give tools to communities and do not depend on like formal services for communities to thrive and to have lifelong tools that help them. Meanwhile, the long-term process happens. No. I think that is a small shot about Colombia. I will continue to the question that will be asked in the discussion. Sorry that.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jen, for sharing the video. And as I said earlier, Alejo will speak again through video in the discussion roundtable with Porteous and the research coordinators. So I will just share my screen again. And we will continue with the next one. So I would like to introduce Tess Olwala, who will be speaking about her research in Kenya.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Jen and Alejo in absentia. My name is Tess Olwala, and I come from Kenya. I was the research coordinator who was responsible for running the research that was done in Kenya for the BLP program. So we collected data from different sites in Kakuma camp, in Kakuma camp. We did it in 3 sites, that is Kakuma camp, Kalobeye camp, and the host community, of course, and that is the map of Kenya, as you can see, with the different sites in place. Next slide, please, Rachel. The context of us doing collecting data from this site is because the refugee families struggle to meet the basic needs as the first thing. And this was seen mainly with the learners who talked about, and even the parents who talked mainly about them not getting adequate or enough basic needs. Then the schools are also considered as safe spaces, but notably they have challenges. For example, the class size, the high teacher turnover, and also them lacking special needs teachers or lack of adequate special needs teachers. And there's also a significant risk of non-attendance and dropout in the schools. And this goes back to the main thing, which is the children lacking the basic needs, and they end up dropping out or not attending schools. Then inclusivity is a challenge. And this is mainly because they are refugees, and also for those who have special needs or are able differently, some things, in some things and in some activities that they do, they end up not being included. Next slide, please, Rachel. Okay. So different perceptions from different stakeholders that we interviewed and talked to, and in terms of them terming well-being and the role of education as a key thing in the schools, was that safety and security was foundational to education, which was seen widely by every stakeholder. Education also builds life skills and nurtures resilience and gives hopes to the future generation, that is the children in the schools. Children also perceive a sense of well-being from their close relationships, and these are people like their families, their peers, and also the teachers in the schools and the immediate environments. And some of the environments that the learners talked about being safe spaces for them were the schools, churches and mosques, and homes. And the activities which helped them to quiet their minds were mostly the physical activities which they engage in, and even some mentioned being activities like being in quiet places or by themselves was also something which helped them to calm their minds. Then schools are also critical for providing social, emotional, and psychosocial support to learners. This was seen by very many different stakeholders that we talked to. Teachers and other actors believe that a key part of their job is supporting the mental health and well-being of students. And this was seen by many, especially the education sector, the actors in the education sector, saying if the teacher's well-being is catered to, the teacher is able now to transfer the same to the learners in the schools. Next slide, please. Okay, some of the findings that we got from schools and from the different stakeholders that we talked to, perceived child level impacts, there was low dropout and higher attendance rates. This was seen widely by many stakeholders, and even the schools, especially the school heads and the teachers, talked about this in totality. Then there's improved learner mindset, concentration, and engagement. This was even seen by us when we were in the schools and even attended some of the club activities, the BLP activities. Then less conflict in schools, improved conducive learning environment, improved strategies for stress management and coping. Additionally, also teachers' well-being was addressed and improved by the BLP activities that they were doing. And in the interviews that we did, especially the focus group discussions, the teachers talked about them being well catered for by BLP, which improved their well-being and also now directly improved the learners' well-being. Yes, thank you. Next slide. Okay, so in this context, which is the Kenyan context, Kakuma camp, Kaloboye camp, and the host community, this information is relevant for the implementers who are at the global level, the MHPSS implementers, of course, and the national level and donors. Dissemination was done at the local level where we talked to the different stakeholders, especially the ones that we had interviewed, and we did it in Lokichogio town. And this was the government, stakeholders, NGOs, NRC, BLP staff, teachers, and the head teachers. They talked about the interventions being very important to address the holistic well-being in schools, but the interventions should consider those concepts, what those concepts mean to the communities they're working with, for them to contextualize the concept to the community itself, because there are some things in the discussions that we had during the dissemination workshop, they talked about things that need to be done so that BLP can be totally contextualized in Kakuma and Kaloboye camps. So the next steps, next slide, please.
That's it, Tess. Next one is.
Oh, that's it? Okay, so the next steps. Okay, so the next steps are BLP is being institutionalized into the Kenyan curriculum by the stakeholders, especially the Ministry of Education in Kenya. So they're trying to make BLP not to be only available to the refugee learners only, but in totality for the sake of social emotional learning to be in the curriculum of Kenya. And also now that NRC is also leaving Kakuma camp implementation of BLP program, they're also talking to different stakeholders, the CBOs in the community, to take the project, and that's the process that is being done right now on the ground. I think that's it for me, Rachel. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Tess. Just a quick reminder before we move on to Greece to please put some questions into the chat so that we can have a Q&A afterwards, because there's a lot of points being raised. So I would encourage you to do that. And now moving on to the research for Greece, which was done by Maria Athanatsiki and will be presented by Jennifer Flemming.
Okay, thank you. I apologize that everyone's hearing me talk more than I would prefer, but Maria has slightly iffy Wi-Fi connection in Tunisia. So we're going to do this so that it's a little bit clearer. So for our research in Greece, we partnered with the wonderful organization Amal Alliance to study their social emotional learning program, Colors of Kindness. Amal has developed and implemented this program in multiple refugee contexts around the world. This included piloting in Bangladesh, and it includes current implementation in both Greece and Uganda. So Colors of Kindness is implemented with refugee or asylum-seeking learners across Greece by 6 organizations. The program is structured such that Amal Alliance provides training and support to these organizations, and then they are able to implement Colors within their context or within other programming. So implementing partners of Amal Alliance were a mix of both international and national level NGOs. And again, both Amal and these NGOs gave us a tremendous amount of support during this research, which really made it possible. So for this project, we collected data from implementers in 16 unique locations across Greece. And we actually conducted data collection a bit differently in Greece than in the other 2 locations, mainly due to some access constraints, especially in relation to accessing camps and the residents of the camps, as well as the many sites of COK implementation, as we said, across the country. So most interviews for the Greece project were actually conducted virtually via phone calls by Maria, who's here today. Slide. So I will first share a series of context-related findings, as the other 2 research coordinators have done as well. The purpose of underlining these context findings is really just to emphasize how critical it is to understand how context interrelates with specific MHPSS challenges, as well as programming. So first, in Greece, displaced families across the country face significant challenges in their daily lives including unmet basic needs, financial insecurity, and specifically the precarity of awaiting asylum decisions. All of these have notable impacts on mental health and well-being. Across all research sites, participants described the vulnerability of refugee families, both those living in camp settings and those integrated into host communities. Integration into Greek society is an ongoing challenge for refugee learners and their families. Our research participants described this lack of social inclusion, from passive lack of acceptance to explicit hostilities by community members or within refugee communities themselves. Barriers to social inclusion are due to a range of things, including language differences, cultural disparities, limited opportunities for meaningful interaction with the host community. And these obstacles obviously can hinder the development of social networks and also a sense of belonging. And these things are crucial for successful integration into Greek society. Refugee service providers face many barriers in providing sustainable quality support, including inconsistent coordination and collaboration with government actors. This finding really just emphasizes the very complex landscape of refugee support services in Greece, both coordination amongst NGOs and amongst groups, and also in partnership with the Greek government. Integration of refugee children into the formal school system is also encumbered by persistent challenges, and these exist at the policy, school, and classroom level. Some of these challenges include insufficient coordination between the education structures, the sort of non-formal and refugee support systems, and the formal education system, and then a host of challenges at the classroom level. These are things like supporting children with a history of trauma and mental health problems, as well as behavioral issues that come up in the classroom, and supporting and training teachers to support these children. Additionally, there's challenges to managing multiple languages in a classroom, inconsistent attendance, there being overage learners in the classroom, etc. And then across all research sites in Greece, there was limited access to MHPSS resources and services for refugee children and their families. Next slide, please. So this next set of findings describe perceptions of the role of education to contribute to children's holistic well-being. And the purpose of this is that interventions and programs seeking to address well-being in school or through non-formal education must consider what these concepts mean to the communities they're working with, of course. So research participants emphasize that a critical aspect of a safe learning environment is assuring the emotional and psychological safety of all children. Caregivers, teachers, implementing partners, other education actors all describe the value of education as strongly linked to children's well-being, especially as a place to develop character and values, and as well as to learn social and emotional skills. Caregivers and teachers perceive school as playing an important role in fostering tolerance and exposing learners to diversity, something that becomes very important in relation to that integration challenge mentioned previously. Teachers believe that supporting the mental health and well-being of students is a critical part of their job. They do, however, need the support to be able to do so effectively, of course. And then finally, teachers and education actors consider the involvement of parents and caregivers as very essential to children's education. But in the refugee context in Greece, there are many systemic barriers to caregiver engagement. Slide, please. And then finally, we have a series of findings that elaborate on the implementation of colors of kindness. And this shares the perspectives of learners, caregivers, teachers, and implementing partners. So overall, colors is viewed as a positive, relevant, and effective approach by the majority of our research participants. Learners in particular could describe specific examples of how they used what they learned in colors, how it made them feel. Teachers describe the usefulness of colors in their classroom, and in particular, how it lends support for them to better understand and support their own students. There were a number of clear outcomes related to children's holistic well-being that were described in the research, and these include things like improvements in emotional regulation, emotional recognition, management, social and communication skills, self-esteem, and the ability for children to express themselves. Can do next slide. So teachers described improved learner engagement and better concentration as well. Both are perceived as improving learning readiness. Still, there also were a number of classroom level challenges to successful implementation of colors. These included things like multiple languages being spoken in a classroom, some difficulty with confusing concepts and terms, there being various ages and developmental stages of learners in a given session, a very short duration of sessions, which meant that it can be easy to get off track and sort of lose momentum, lose the day, and also that the use of technology and tablets, teachers noted that they felt could sometimes disengage children from the session, which is interesting, I think. In addition, there were a number of implementation level challenges. This included things like high turnover rate of teachers and implementing staff, lack of access to the camps themselves and living spaces, and therefore the caregivers of children in the program, the ongoing mobility of children in and out of these locations, and then some space-related limitations as well, so that children could feel comfortable taking part in these sessions, talking about hard things, talking about their emotions. Slide, please. So overall, Greece is a challenging place to operate due to the dynamic nature of the context itself, as well as of policy and the practical application of policy. And this was very much true for the NGOs that we worked with, as well as came up with the refugee education coordinators too. So the largest international NGO that was actually implementing Colors has been winding down its programming for a while now, focusing on handing over services to local partners, and many of Amal's partners are local. So this will become more and more relevant for the Greece context moving forward, and is a really effective way for Amal to be considering how it implements in the Greece context. And then I think most importantly, similar to NRC and Kenya, Amal Alliance's sustainability strategy is aimed at the institutionalization of Colors into the formal education system. And this is happening in the process, or in the same timeline as our research, where Colors is being adopted by the Ministry of Education with the idea that it will eventually be integrated into the formal school system and beyond the refugee population in Greece. And I will stop there.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jen. And thank you so much to all the research coordinators for keeping it very timely. Very impressive. And now we will move on to a sort of roundtable discussion between the research coordinators and Portuguese, the funding body. And that will take place with the research coordinators you heard from, and also Charlotte Roche from Portuguese. So perhaps, Jen, you would like to share Alejo's first point. I believe he has something that he would like to share this discussion round.
Yeah, definitely. So I will just note the first discussion question, and then I will just share Alejo's response to it that is prepared first, and then we can hand it over to Maria or Tess to reflect. So the first question that I had was for the research coordinators, and this is very broad. It was just asking them to share some key reflections on the process of leading the research in their context. And in particular, kind of wondering about some of the ways of working that we prioritized as a team, and any enablers or challenges in your context. So with that, I'm going to share Alejo's answer first.
That I'm going ahead, but talking about some key reflection on the processes, what we learn about this research in Colombia. I think two big findings were here for me, and that I will share briefly. First one is that the coordination with NRC was the most important process in the research, because they helped us, they opened their doors to their projects, to their information, to the people in field. And this coordination was the most important part. People in RC was so kind with us, with our team, and helped us a lot to bring to keep all the information together, to help us go to the regions, to help us coordinate the travels that were to this context with difficult access. So coordination is one of the, and good relationships with the other organizations is a key finding here, and was a key enabler. And also with the research team, something really important was to debrief every day our feelings, because in context like Colombia, where armed conflict is so hard, and the experiences of the people are so profoundly rooted in pain now, and in different griefs and loss. The stories they told you were really difficult to hear, and you need to take care of your team. No? So you need to keep checking in on your emotions and how the team is going, and you can like process all the information. Because for some people in the context, it was their first time they felt heard by an external actor, no, which was really difficult to hear. But if you take care of your team, you can make real their research, because people will not be too burdened or too overwhelmed on passing of the days. No, so these are two key reflections I hope you liked about Colombia. I wait you all here in Colombia. Please feel free to contact me and to come and talk more about Colombia. Best wishes, and I hope the webinar is going really well there.
Great. So I will also now pass on to Maria and Tess, if either of you would like to weigh in on this same question.
Hello, Jen. Hello, everyone. This is Maria Thanatsiki. I worked as the research coordinator in Greece. First of all, my multiple deployments in North Africa the recent months did not allow me to responsibly undertake the presentation of the findings. But Jen, I'm very honored to see that you presented the findings from Greece. It's still, it's so exciting to see that we reached at this level to already have the research reports and research findings in place. So when it comes to the reflections on the process, it's really hard to pick one, but I decided to reflect on my experience as a researcher on topics that are sensitive and have to do with mental health in a vulnerable group of a society as the refugees and asylum seekers. So as a leader of a research, you usually put a lot of effort to organize things, coordinate, make sure you have your protocols in place, which are reviewed. And then you think that when you reach the point where you're in the interview room, then you've done the work. You just put the record on, and then you just make sure you save the data. But then it's when you realize that it all starts now, because you have a human being in front of you. So while the protocol is the leading figure until that moment, it's where the ethical considerations start to take over. So then you see the first question of the protocol, and you have to ask a father, what are the challenges of your child as a refugee in Greece? And then you're like, how can I ask this question to a person that left his country and now lives in a socio-political context where there is increase of racism or growing anti-sentiment, anti-refugee sentiment? Or as researchers, we have to stay. We know that our guideline is to avoid emotional language, but how can you stay emotional neutral when a mother shares excitingly her experience towards survival and that she took her children to Greece to flee war? And then you have to balance during that moment between being a responsible professional and collect as much data as you can so that you have a rich information to analyze later. But then also you want to make sure you do no harm to the person you have in front of you. So how much can you push forward? How many questions, follow-up questions can you make to make sure you don't harm the person or you don't trigger distressing experiences too much? So my reflection here is actually that the ethical considerations are always in place, and the reflections on them do not finish today when the research finishes. I'm still revisiting the replies I gave to the people that disclosed abuse to me. I want to make sure I refer them to the correct place. And this is going to be an ongoing learning process to me, because I will keep revisiting my discussions I had with 37 individuals.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you for sharing. Tess, would you like to weigh in as well?
Yes, thank you, Jen. I'll start maybe with the debriefing part of it all. When we were in the field, Jen was with us offline and online. Also, she came to Kenya, which was amazing for us as a team, the Kenyan team. We had a huge support from her. And when she was not around, we usually had daily check-ins with her, I and her in the evening. But at the end of the day, I and the 6 enumerators who are there from the schools we collected data from, we went to 9 schools. I forgot to tell you that, sorry. From the schools we went to, we had daily check-ins at the end of the day just to come together and talk about the things that maybe they could not, the things they saw, first of all, and the things they also noticed from the different stakeholders that we talked to at the end of the day. So that was a very pivotal point because some of the things ended up in our reports because that was the observation part of us collecting the data. So that was amazing for us debriefing at the end of the day. The way we worked in the field, we had teamwork. And maybe one of the challenges we experienced in the team, which came in handy because of the different enumerators we had, it was language barrier. So we had enumerators who could speak different languages, which was amazing. But in some cases, for the refugee learners, we had to get translators for us in the field to also help with the translation part of it, just to make things better and clear for us when we're collecting data. Also, one of the things which ended up working differently from what we had thought at the first when we were coming up with the guides for collecting the data. Jane thought about us doing it a bit different for the shy learners, because there are some FGDs that we did with very shy learners, and some of them could not really express themselves verbally. So we ended up doing another different activity, and that was drawing, which came out very nicely because the learners who were shy could draw, but maybe not talk or not talk as much as we wanted. But from the drawings that they came up with, it showed a very different perspective from the questions that we had. And it also made the report to be juicy in terms of us getting more information from them in a different way than we had expected. Then another maybe challenge that we also had, sometimes some schools were very small, some schools did not have enough classrooms, so we had to collect data outside the classes. Sometimes when it's break time, there's too much noise and maybe the school is very small, so we had to adapt accordingly depending on the situation that we're in. But all in all, everything worked out well because we were adjusting as we were going. The schools are different, so we had to adjust differently in the different schools. But we had so much support from the NRC team, and that was amazing for us because we went to schools and we got all the people that we wanted to interview by the time we got to the schools, and that was amazing. So thank you to the NRC Education Department for that. That was really, it made our work very easy. So on my personal reflections, maybe I got to realize that from the different stakeholders that we interviewed, they all play a pivotal role in shaping the program's impact and success because they all bring in unique perspectives and expertise and also insights that are very crucial for the continuous improvement of the BLP program. And also the fact that the Ministry of Education is also aiming to institutionalize BLP for it to move beyond the refugee populations is a very positive move towards MHPSS in schools and also integrating the social emotional learning into the curriculum. I think I've covered everything. Thank you.
That's great, Tess. Thank you so much. Despite the fact that I say I don't want to be the one talking so much, I'm going to add one more reflection that I think is my reflection overall, getting to work really closely with each research coordinator. And that is just that we had a lot of flexibility on the project, and in particular in regard to our donor, who really in retrospect now was such a key to our success in getting data in each country. Each country just everything unfolded so differently. So, when you're trying to oversee 3 different sites of data collection, the actual ability to be very flexible in real time was very, very key for us. And just noting, and segue into my questions and welcoming Porticus to the conversation as well. But it was extremely useful and extremely effective for us to be able to have that flexibility and adapt our project in real time. And an example of something we were able to do with the adaptability was we were able to, when we saved a little bit of cost on field work, we were able to transfer some of that money to bring the research coordinators on for more days, and we were able to have each of them lead in data analysis for their specific context as well, which initially we weren't quite sure we'd have the ability to do that. So that was something that just really allowed us to feel like we were fully a team and we were able to all come together and do the data analysis together as a team. And collaboratively, as opposed to trying to kind of make things rush at the end and just get the data analyzed, get the reports written. So that was big appreciation to Porticus for that sort of a flexibility and adaptability in terms of how we worked. So I will then segue into a question that is aimed at Porticus, and in particular Charlotte, who has been our wonderful Porticus point of contact for the duration of this project. And we're just hoping that, Charlotte, you could tell us a bit about Porticus's approach as a donor to funding research, how that has evolved alongside priorities within the foundation itself.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. And first of all, thank you for the invitation to the panel discussion. And also, I just wanted to say, because I don't know if we actually said it to the full team of MHPSS Collaborative and the research coordinator, but congratulations for the impressive work and your significant contribution to the evidence base on MHPSS. It's so wonderful to see, after I think 3 to almost 4 years, the result of this of the research. So congratulations. So I just thought maybe before I explain a bit like our approach as a funder towards research, maybe I should explain a bit who we are as a funder very briefly, just to explain that as a donor, we collaborate with various stakeholders in the local and national education ecosystem. So it goes from implementers to policymakers, to local researchers, to international actors, to build inclusive education systems that support children who are displaced and marginalized. And our focus is on social-emotional learning, and to embed social-emotional learning into policy, practices, tools, mindset, so that children who are in adversity are supported to stay in school, receive quality education, and develop to their full potential. So I'm just giving you this brief context to explain that to support this strategy, our approach to research is to support research initiatives that generate new evidence to bridge the gap on the evidence base in social-emotional learning and children's mental health, especially in global south. And this is in order to drive change in policy and practice. This being said, when it comes to the, yeah, so so just to give you a brief understanding of how we view research from a donor perspective, what we see as most relevant is to support research that is, first of all, locally driven, also widely actionable and accessible, and also produced through a participatory process. So maybe just let me take a few minutes to explain a bit what we mean by this kind of few principles. So by locally driven, what we want is, what we understand is we want indeed like research to inform practices, tools, and programs that are culturally appropriate and that address the unique needs and challenges of the people who are affected. But also we acknowledge that there is a lack of research from local south, and therefore as a donor we want to emphasize our funding on localization and to ensure that the research being produced is context specific and that is made by and for actors on the ground. Another aspect is for research to be actionable and available. So actionable in the terms that ideally would be synthesized for a specific audience and such as policymakers and implementers, so they can be applied effectively, and available in the sense that research and evidence should be available as public goods and accessible in local languages, and again presented in a format, in a package that is easily understandable and easy to apply. And finally, a third maybe like principle which is key, or which is indeed dear to Porticus, is for the research to be conducted through a participatory and inclusive process, which really sounds like in this research has been done this way way to represent voice of children and individuals who are often marginalized and displaced and not represented in global data and events, which also implies engaging with local stakeholders and local researchers in the co-creation of the research process, in the research priorities, in the methodology and the interpretation of findings. And finally, I just want to say that indeed meaningful participation is felt as a moral obligation as a donor, but also we see it as a route to create impactful program and to have like to create lasting change. And maybe a last word is that I just want to, I mean, with Duoker, with also on the poll, in the webinar, we also were reflecting on you know, how we approach research, and I've said it is an ongoing reflection. We are still in the process right now with scoping what are the needs and how does you know, knowledge and evidence should be disseminated and perceived, and how can we support the uptake of evidence. So it is like an ongoing process, I think.
Perfect. Jennifer, would you like to add anything else to that? I know that we are out of time and it's currently actually overtime, but are you happy for us to wrap up?
Yes.
Yeah. Perfect. So sorry everybody for all of you getting kicked out. I think it happened to all of us. Must have been just a little mistake. But thank you so much for joining us today. There were 2 questions in the chat box, and we will answer those questions when we send out the slides and the recording of the webinar. So sorry that we cannot get to them and we can't have a longer discussion, but I think a lot of the points that were raised were also answered within this discussion round as well. So I will pass you back to Marcio just to close everything and say goodbye. But from the MHPSS Collaborative, thank you so much for joining us today and for being with us for this webinar.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, everyone. And apologies for this. At least it was a very at the end that we all got kicked off. I got in panic here, Valeria as well. And what happened? That we pressed the red button, the red emergency button, but thankfully we were at the end. And at least we will, for the recording sessions, we will be able to edit it and make it as one video at least, and we will find out here what happened. Likely somebody pressed the ended the webinar when leaving the room, pressed the button, ended the webinar accidentally. That's likely what happened. Well, apologies for this, but thankfully it's half bad, half good. It's half good because it was towards the end. Anyway, was an incredible learning experience. I'm so excited with what I heard here today. I'm so glad that I was able to come and do the initial welcome and the closing remarks here. And also thanking everyone, thanking all the panelists, the moderators, all the partners, organizations. This has been an incredible opportunity, and we are very excited that we were able to host this event today. Thank you all once again. The webinar recording will be posted widely at MHPSS.net social medias, the different channels, so that should be there soon. And see you next time. Bye for now.